Yeah, I'll react to that, sure. Okay, guys, up next. Jacobites.
Becoming king. You might think
Why is
that
it 44 seconds in? Queen Liz, rest in peace. Although, I gotta say, saying like the King of England sounds kind of cool. Let's do it. Who would be Jacobite King of the UK today? Jacobites. Trying to recall. Let's do it. Ooh, Vlogging Through History. That's a great channel. That's one of the few reaction channels that like I watch myself, especially a lot of like the American history videos he does. I like those. Let's go. Useful charts, awesome channel. Original link to the video, top description. Below that, Discord, all that good stuff. Hit all the buttons except the bad one. Let's go. Hope you're all doing well. Let's go. Let's
Hi,
learn.
this is Matt Baker.
Hey.
So we have a new king of the United Kingdom, Charles III.
Do I salute?
But is he the rightful heir to the throne? Well, according to the Royal Stuart Society, no, he is not. This
Something
is
to do with
because
Scotland?
334 years ago, a child who was first in line to the throne got skipped over. And then a little while later, a bunch more people got skipped over. And the throne went to someone who was number 23 in the line of succession. So in today's term,
Can I say something? Obviously, you know, I think it's a good thing in today's day and age to kind of get rid of the male primogenitor, or like the male, like it's the male until you don't have any males left, then it's the female. So like if you had like a daughter, a son, a daughter, that third child of a son would be it. But I kind of miss that because it made like the chart so fun that like, all right, like finding the next one. Okay, this one's out. So we go over here and then this daughter, and then it was a bit more confusing, but kind of fun.
that would be like Lucas Tyndall beating out all of these other people and eventually becoming king. You might think that that would never happen, but it did happen once. And of course, not everyone was happy about it. Those who fought against this big leap in the line of succession that occurred 300 years ago were known as the Jacobites. And ever since then, they have kept track of an alternative line of kings and queens that can be traced all the way to today. So who does that alternative line lead to? In other words, who would...
I'm too like energetic right now. I'm going to pause too much, but I remember the movie. I like the movie of Jackie Chan, Owen Wilson. Excuse me. Shanghai Nights. There's also Shanghai Noon. But the bad guy in the Shanghai Nights, he was 16th in line for the throne, and he needed to get all the others eliminated so he'd be first in line. But my point is, I remember hearing 16th. That's crazy. But 16 isn't that bad, I feel like, because there's like 20s. Okay.
Would be king today, according to the Jacobites? Well, to find out, let's go back to the year 1688, which was when James II and 7th was king. He has two numbers because at that point, England and Scotland were still two separate kingdoms, and thus he was James II of England, but James VII of Scotland.
I was just learning about the invasion of Buda, Hungary, against the Ottoman Empire. And it was the same exact time. I think it was 1688 or something. So that's cool.
January 1688.
I gotta shut up.
The king had just two legitimate children, Mary and Anne. Their mother, however, had died many years before that, so the king had actually remarried. And what do you know? In June of 1688, his new wife gave birth to a baby boy, who they named James. This meant that the young James was now first in line to the throne, because up until recently, males were given priority over females. In fact, they even made James the Prince of Wales. Now, this all sounds pretty straightforward, but there was a problem. The king's second wife was an Italian princess who was Catholic, and the king had converted to Catholicism as well. England and Scotland didn't really want a Catholic king, but they weren't too worried because Mary and Anne were both Protestants, so the whole having a Catholic monarch thing was going to be temporary. But the birth of James changed all that.
And James was okay with his two daughters being Protestant. By the way, Anne always looks like a babe. I'm just gonna say it. And whoa, sorry, go.
You see, James was going to be raised Catholic, and thus England and Scotland wouldn't be reverting back to a Protestant monarchy after all. So here's what happened. Mary, who was second in line, happened to be married to the person who was fourth in line, her cousin William, who was the Prince of Orange. A bunch of English nobles therefore wrote to William and invited him to invade their country and force the king to make Mary his heir. William said sure, and things actually went better for him than expected. King James II and VII fled the country, and not only was Mary declared queen, but William was declared joint king as well. They reigned together until Mary's death in 1694, and then William reigned on his own for an additional 7 more years. Mary and William didn't have any children, but Anne had a son named William. So the thought was that King William would be followed by Anne, and then Anne would be followed by her son William. But unfortunately, the young William died at age 11, just before his mother became queen. This meant that a strong argument could be made that James, now living in exile in France, should become king after all. In order to prevent this, the English Parliament passed a law in 1701.
I was going to say, why don't they go over here for Mary and Anne, but I guess they're already queens of Spain and Sardinia, respectively. And were there any cases of female children of monarchs trying to foil the pregnancy of their mother in fear that it might be a son and therefore take over? Because imagine being like a firstborn daughter of a king and going for like 17 years thinking like, oh my God, I'm going to be it. And then for a son to be born. So I wonder if like there's any like, you know,
known as the Act of Settlement. Living in exile in France should become king after all. In order to prevent this, the English Parliament passed a law in 1701 known as the Act of Settlement, which barred Catholics from ever becoming monarch. More specifically, it stated that unless Anne had another child, the throne of England would, after Anne's death, pass all the way down to a woman named Sophia of Hanover, or her Protestant heirs. Sophia was the daughter of Elizabeth, who in turn was the daughter of King James I. All these other people were Catholics, and thus they were skipped over. Scotland, however, was less sure about all of this. Its parliament passed a law in 1704 called the Act of Security, which stated that Scotland had the right to choose a different monarch.
I thought they also didn't want a Protestant or a Catholic. They didn't want to.
So for a moment, it looked as though England and Scotland might part ways. But then a bunch of politicians got down to work and managed to push through the Acts of Union, which formally merged England and Scotland into a single kingdom called Great Britain in 1707. But not everyone was happy with this, particularly in Scotland. Those who supported James, the former Prince of Wales.
I wonder why they added the like the white around. Oh, kind of because it's okay. Never mind.
Particularly in Scotland. Those who supported James, the former Prince of Wales, became known as the Jacobites, Jacob being a variation on the name James. When Queen Anne died in 1714 and Sophia of Hanover's son George became King of Great Britain as George I, this gave the Jacobites a good excuse to rise up and put a different king on the throne instead. After all, George was German and didn't even speak English. So in 1715 and
Der
1719,
Koning
there were
des
major
Großbritannien.
Jacobite rebellions, mostly in Scotland. James was declared James III and VIII, and he even set up court in Scone Palace for a while. But in the end, both attempts to secure the throne for him failed. In 1745, another major attempt was made, this time led by James's son Charles.
Wait, what?
He even set up court in Scone Palace for a while. But in the end, both attempts to secure the throne for him failed. In 1745, another major attempt was made, this time led by James's son Charles.
I have to pee so bad. I'll be right back. Okay, I'll wash my hands. I washed my hands. Did I? Hand sanitizer, just as good.
Known as Bonnie Prince Charlie. But yet again, the Jacobites failed. Thus, the line
Another
major attempt was made,
She's pretty good look. Anne, my girl.
this time led by James's son Charles, known as Bonnie Prince Charlie. But yet again, the Jacobites failed. Thus, the line that started from George I was secured, and it was able to continue all the way to today. But what if the Jacobites had won? Who would be king today in that scenario? Or what if Scotland becomes independent and decides that they want to place the Jacobite heir on the throne in place of Charles III?
Do you think any Scots here? What's the word Al Murray used? Jocks? Do you think... my guess is that Scotland just wouldn't have a monarch, but do you think they would if Scotland were to get out of the UK?
Who would be king of Scotland in that scenario? Well, before we dive into it, I want to tell you about my own attempt to build a kingdom in Scotland. Yes, you heard that right. I, Lord Matt Baker, am
It's the land plot. Guys,
building a quote-unquote
I have a
kingdom
sixth sense.
in Scotland. In one of my
Please use the established titles / useful charts, guys. It helps them out. Use their link.
previous videos, I mentioned that I am now the proud owner of a small plot of land in Scotland.
I think Mark
A whopping
Felton
1
has-
foot by 1 foot souvenir plot, to be exact. Based on a very old Scottish tradition, this gives me the right to use the honorific laird or lord, and I even have this fancy certificate to prove it. Well, thanks to today's sponsor, Established Titles, you can become a lord or lady as
What's
well.
it cost?
You can find them by using the link in the description or pinned comment. They will also plant a tree on your behalf. So not only do you get a fancy title and the right to brag to your friends, but you also get to help the environment. And here's the really cool thing. If you use the code USEFULCHARTS, not only will you get 10% off, you'll also be guaranteed to get a souvenir plot next to all the other Useful Charts fans, which means
stretch,
we can
guys.
start to build our very own kingdom in Scotland. And maybe at some point down the line, all of us lords and ladies can get together to choose a nominal king or queen. So be sure to check out Established Titles and stay tuned for future news about the Useful Charts kingdom. But back to the Jacobites. The so-called James III and VIII lived all the way to 1766, which means that if he had become king, he would have reigned for 65 years, almost as long as Queen Elizabeth, and it would have been his son that would have become King Charles III instead of this guy. But that never happened, and instead, James became known as the Old Pretender, and Charles as the Young Pretender. The word pretender meaning someone that has a claim to a throne, but does not actually possess it. Now, Charles did not have any legitimate children, so when he died, his claim to the throne passed to his younger brother, Henry, who was a Catholic priest, and not only that, a high-ranking cardinal as well. Now, as a priest, Henry didn't have any children, so he ended up being the last surviving legitimate descendant of King James II and VII. I say legitimate because James II actually did have some other descendants, but we'll come back to that later. So to continue the Jacobite succession, we have
Guys, you know, like the War of the Austrian Succession or War of the Spanish Succession, probably more famous. Um, so that happens when, because I hear like it happened when like the king didn't have a son, but don't they resort to like the next guy over? So do those succession crises only happen when like there is no other alternative, and so like you have to make a new, completely unrelated to the last king or to the royal tree, like you just go do a poll or something?
to look elsewhere. The next person in the original line of succession after William, Prince of Orange, had been Marie Louise, Queen Consort of Spain. Her husband was the infamous Charles II, the last Habsburg King of Spain. But they, of course, didn't have any children, so we then have to proceed through her sister, Anne Marie. Anne Marie also became a queen consort of Sardinia, and she had several children, the most senior of which was her son, Charles Emmanuel, who went on to become King of Sardinia. He was followed by his son, Victor Amadeus III, and then by Victor's son, Charles Emmanuel IV. Upon the death of Cardinal Henry, who, according to the Jacobite succession, had been Henry IX, Charles Emmanuel IV of Sardinia became the most senior living descendant of Charles I of England and Scotland, and thus, according to the Jacobites, the true King of Great Britain. From there, the claim...
Isn't that isn't that George the Third right there? His face is branded in my brain as that son of a, no, just the guy who taxes
passed to his brother, King Victor Emmanuel I of Sardinia, and then to Victor's daughter, Mary, the Duchess of Modena. Then Mary's son Francis, the Duke of Modena, and then Francis's niece Mary, who became the queen consort of Bavaria. Now, Bavaria ceased to be a kingdom in 1918 at the end of World War I, and soon thereafter, Mary's son Ruprecht from the House of Wittelsbach inherited both the claim to the former kingdom of Bavaria as well as the Jacobite claim to the UK. He was followed by his son Albrecht, who took the title Duke of Bavaria and held it for 41 years from 1955 to 1996. Which brings us to the man who should be king of the United Kingdom today.
And he's younger than me?
According to the Jacobites.
Oh, wait, I don't know.
The 89-year-old current Duke of Bavaria.
Never mind. For some reason, I thought, never mind, I'm stupid. I heard 1996, guys.
To the Jacobites. The 89-year-old current Duke of Bavaria, Franz, who, if he were king of the United Kingdom, would be known as Francis II. Just last year, Franz officially came out of the closet, thus becoming the first head of a royal house to be openly gay. He has a same-sex partner named Thomas Greinwald, but no children. And thus, when Franz dies, the Jacobite claim will pass to his younger brother, Max, assuming that Max, who's also in his 80s,
is not gay,
doesn't die first. And then it will pass to Max's daughter, Sophie, whose husband happens to be the current heir to the throne of Liechtenstein. Thus, for the first time in over 100 years, we're likely to have a Jacobite pretender who actually holds a real title. And not only that, it is likely that she will someday be succeeded by her son, Prince Joseph, who would then become both the reigning monarch of Liechtenstein and the Jacobite heir.
I don't mean to be like rude or anything, but I've driven through Liechtenstein purposely because I wanted to like get out and set my feet on the ground just to say I've been to Liechtenstein. And this is coming from someone from Rhode Island, okay, from a very small place. But Liechtenstein is extremely small. So, I mean, you're king of like... Okay, I don't want to... Sorry, I didn't do preemptive like. OBS, I got to get a new computer.
The Jacobite heir. So, if Scotland wanted to have a personal union with a tiny German-speaking microstate, it could be possible. But there's one final twist to this real-life Game of Thrones. As I mentioned earlier, James II and VII actually had some illegitimate offspring as well. His first child to reach adulthood was actually a daughter named Henrietta Fitzjames. Fitz means child of and was often used as a part of the surname for the illegitimate children of the king. Henrietta had a son named James, who had a son named James, who had a daughter named Anne, who married a man named Hugh Seymour, who himself was an illegitimate descendant of King Charles I. Together, they had a son named Horace, who had a daughter named Adelaide, who married Frederick Spencer, the 4th Earl Spencer. They had a son who became the 6th Earl Spencer, who was then followed by the 7th Earl Spencer and the 8th Earl Spencer. And the 8th Earl Spencer had a daughter whose name you might recognize, Lady Diana Spencer, who was the first wife of King Charles III and the mother of both William and Harry. This means that William, if and when he becomes king, will be the first British monarch in over 300 years to descend from King James II and VII. Now, keep in mind, he's not actually the most senior person in this illegitimate line, but he is a descendant nonetheless. And so maybe, just maybe, that will make the Jacobites feel just a wee bit better. I don't know.
Or worse. Or better. Worse. I mean, they're illegitimate.
What do you think? Is Charles III the true king of the United Kingdom? Or is it Francis II? Or perhaps there shouldn't be a king at all? Let me know in the comments.
I mean, here is my input on that. Clearly, it was done in a kind of the thing was signed through to make it so that no Catholic could get the throne, right? And that was completely kind of BS, but nonetheless, they're not BS, because that would mean it's not really legitimate. Like a little sneaky, and like you just kind of declared it, but I mean, it happened. And I don't see why you should change it now, you know? It doesn't seem like a big enough deal and it was so long ago to warrant any change in the present day. Does that make sense? But I do see how that was kind of bullcrap that they just, okay, no Catholics. And so in that way, I see how that could be justification. But, I mean, the history from then to now isn't filled with them. It's filled with these guys, and so...
And if you like what-if scenarios, be sure to check out our videos. Is Britain's real monarch living in Australia? And who would be king of England today, according to Henry VIII's will? I'll leave a link to both of those on screen now. Thanks for watching.
Thank you for making. I gotta buy some posters. Cool posters. All right, guys. Hope you're all doing well, learned something, or can teach me something. Yeah. Love you guys. See you guys next time. Bye-bye.